Today, I will be going over the Black Friday and the rest of the Week 13 NFL slate as we recap the Thanksgiving slate on Friday. I also gave you my money line picks for those games and best bets. This is how we did. In the money line, I went 13 and 3. That puts me at 131 and 64 on the year. My three misses in the money line were, of course, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. Who would have thought Russell Wilson, the Steelers, would have put up 44 points? Arizona and Minnesota. Oh, that one earned because I add Arizona and then the Falcons and Kirk Cousins. And I have no idea what went on there in Atlanta. And maybe time for them to potentially go to Michael Penix. Question mark. So those are my three misses. In best bets, we obviously did not hit Atlanta plus 1.5. And then Houston did not cover 4.5. Mac Jones backdoor cover. Alshire has now been suspended 3 games by the NFL for that hit on Trevor Lawrence, which for the record, I don't agree with. I thought it was a white slide by Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, it looked like a vicious hit, but I don't know what else Shire's supposed to do in that circumstance. To be honest with you, I think the fight afterwards is what caused the ejection, not necessarily the hit in my eyes. So maybe you suspend him a game for the fight. I just don't understand the 3 game appeal on that. Uh, we did it Seattle minus 1.5. Boy, did that look shaky early, huh? But Aaron Rodgers, Jets are gonna jet. That Rams Saints game was weird. It was 6-0 Saints at the end of the first half. We ended up getting the Rams though. They covered 2.5. And then Buffalo, I told you they were gonna stomp out San Francisco Sunday night in that snowstorm. Of course, I had no idea Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason would go down. Nonetheless, though, Buffalo minus 6.5. So we covered 3 out of 5 on best bets. That puts us a winning week and 38 for 65 on the year. Last year for week 13, we were 132 and 61 in the money line. So we were about right there with our money line streak from last year. 42 for 64 with one push. So we are about 4 games off of best bets. Week 12, we had a very rough week. So we need to bounce back here. I need to be at least, 3 out of 5 here, I would say, hopefully for the rest of the season in best bets. But what started off, Chiefs, they defeat the Raiders 19-17. I mean, what can I say? Kansas City doesn't play well. Raiders make a mistake. Instead of an illegal formation or a snap infraction or a false start, whatever you want to call it, that would kill that last play, there was a fumble. Chiefs recover it, and Kansas City has only lost 1 game. Here they are, 11-1. They just find a way to win games. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. And yes, it does not look pretty. And yes, at times they sometimes to me look worse than they did last year. But we said this about the Chiefs last year. They had to go to Buffalo in the divisional round. They won. They had to go to Baltimore in the AFC Championship game. They won. So, while it doesn't look pretty, you can't doubt the Chiefs. They just find a way. And I don't think that this is the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles because of the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and obviously they don't have that relationship falling apart the way it sounded like Nick Sirianni and Matt Patricia and Jalen Hurts. Everything was going on there with Philadelphia. I am concerned, though, for the Chiefs in this aspect that you keep winning one possession games, a lot like the Minnesota Vikings. Eventually, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. For Kansas City's sake, I think they do have to have one blowout win. They did against the Saints. They couldn't do it against Carolina. There's a Cleveland spot there in a couple weeks. They could do it. They're still battling with Buffalo for the number 1 seed. They just don't blow anybody out this year, but they're so good situationally, aka New England Patriots esque, that sometimes it just doesn't matter. I already alluded to this. The Chargers defense, they got 4 interceptions. Their offense didn't even play well. Without J.K. Dobbins, it was really Ryan McConkey or bust. And they just got 4 interceptions off Kirk Cousins, who looks immobile, and he looks like he's getting worse and regressed off that Achilles tear last year. He's like worse as the season goes on, And Atlanta, who started, out 6-3 this year, they were in a good spot. They had a 4-game lead essentially on Tampa Bay. 3-game lead in the loss column, plus beating them end to end twice. And now all of a sudden they've lost 3 in a row. Tampa comes back. They've won a couple in a row. And here we are. The Atlanta Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers are tied for the lead in the NFC South. Where AFC wise, the Chargers are 8-4, Denver is 8-5. And while Indianapolis beat New England, and boy, Drake May, does he not look the part? He's getting better and better every single week. I said I would not take New England or I would, not take Indy here in this spot. I didn't know how the game was going to go. Drake May continues to bounce back. Anthony Richardson continues to be a roller coaster. Essentially completing 10 passes and scoring 25 points, and then makes the incredible play on the goal line to win that game for Indianapolis. An incredible game for the Colts, who are still 2 games back of the Texans, who, as I mentioned, did beat the Jaguars 23-20. Mac Jones came in relief. Jaguars at 6 points here late in the fourth quarter. Mac Jones goes 2 no huddle drives, gets in the end zone twice. Listen, Trevor Lawrence was not moving the ball for Jacksonville anyway. Again, prayers up to Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be in concussion protocol. This Jags team is a mess. And again, I'm a big Doug Peterson guy. He won Super Bowl 52 in Philadelphia with my Eagles. But that Jaguars team is a mess. Outside of Brian Thomas at receiver, you don't really know what they have. ETN and Bigsby been nice backs, but they've been in and out of the lineup this year. Their defense is atrocious. Outside of Josh Hines Allen, they don't have a lot of players. So I don't know what to make of Jacksonville. For Houston, they're 2 games up on Indianapolis. They should win that AFC South crown. But this team is really a Joe Mixon or bust offense. The last couple of weeks against divisional opponents, which Houston seems to always play close, Joe Mixon gets about 20 yards rushing in the first half. Second half, he turns it on, gets a touchdown, gets over 100 yards. But I said this year about Houston. You know, even with Nico Collins coming back, and even when they had Stephon Diggs, this offense was a Joe Mixon or bust offense. CJ Stroud is at a little bit of a sophomore slump, and they just don't look as efficient as they did a year ago. Okay, Commanders stomped out Tennessee. I said it was possible. Listen, I don't know what you're going to get from Will Levis week to week. I said, Commanders lost 3 in a row. This is the bounce back spot for them. They certainly do bounce back 42-19. And I do think that, in the NFC North, we're clearly going to get 3 playoff teams, so 2 wild cards out of that, whether it's Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, whoever are the 2 wild cards. And I think Washington will end up taking that 7th spot right now in the NFC. So if you're Atlanta and Tampa Bay, to me in that NFC South, and obviously everybody in the NFC West with Seattle, Arizona, Rams, those are 5 teams essentially fighting for 2 spots, which is their divisional spots. As I mentioned, who would have thought Russell Wilson, right? 48 points. And Joe Burrow did have a couple turnovers. Now, the Bengals did get a pick six themselves, so that kind of washed out, even though Burrow gave the Steelers 10 points. The Bengals have 4 losses this year when scoring over 30. Think about this. They have 2 losses this year when they've scored over 38 points. It's just insane. They're going to become the first team in NFL history to have somebody lead the league in touchdown passes, have the leading receiver in touchdown catches, have the leading sack getter, and miss the playoffs. Joe Burrow, has he turned the football over a little bit too much? Sure, you can make that argument. But when you have Jamar Chase, when you have Oki Bosch, when you have T. Higgins, you have Tanner Hudson, you have Gesicki, who's playing well at tight end. Trey Anderson's doing good on the defense side of the ball. They just don't have a secondary. They can't get stops. Russell Wilson was comfortable all day in the pocket. And who would have thought this Arthur Smith led Steelers offense that has won 2 games this year? Of course, the game that they won in Atlanta week 1 and then Baltimore a couple weeks ago. Who would have thought they won 2 games this year, taking only field goals? And here they are putting up 44 points on a Bengals defense. You could say I was wrong on the Bengals. Listen, I had them as like an 11-12 win team. I had them as the number one seed in the AFC. But I look at it, and a 4-8 team really should be, 8-4 or 9-3 at least. There's so many flip games on the table early on. New England, Kansas City, Baltimore, even the Washington game that you look at and you go, if Cincinnati can just get one stop, the second Baltimore game, this Pittsburgh game, I mean, those are six games. Could Cincinnati theoretically be 10-2 if they flip those six games? Sure, they could. Um, Lou Anarumo, he's been a great defensive coordinator. He helped the Bengals win the Super Bowl, obviously, a few years ago. But this defense at this point now is an abject disaster. Arizona, they were my upset of the week. I said I didn't want to take them. I probably should have. I would have swapped out Atlanta for them, so we would have been 4 for 5 in best bets. I would have kept that Houston game, which would have killed us. So I would have been even more mad that we would have went 4 for 5 and a Mac Jones backdoor cover would have cost us. But I liked Arizona to upset Minnesota. They would have covered the 3.5. They were dominating the whole game, 22-6. And again, this has been the Vikings all year. They play one good half, they play one good half, and they hope to hang on. Sam Darnold, an incredible fourth quarter. And for that Brian Flores defense, holding Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, who may be the most streakiest team in the NFL, to field goals was huge. And again, big win for the Vikings as they try to keep pace with not only that 5 seed in the NFC wildcard picture, but the division as well. As I mentioned, Rams, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, they scored 21 unanswered in the second half to beat the Saints 21-14. Listen, the Saints are playing good defense under Darren Rizzi. They lost Taysom Hill to a torn ACL. Like, honestly, at this point, who cares about the Saints? The Carolina Panthers are playing better football. How about Bryce Young over the last month? Ever since he came back from his benching, this is why the Panthers hired Dave Canales. And this is why this is the potential we saw in Bryce Young coming out of Alabama. This is why Frank Reich and that crew took him number one. Clearly, CJ Stroud right now is the better quarterback, but I got to tell you what, over the last month, Bryce Young has played better football. And he took a Tampa Bay Buccaneer defense, which under Todd Bowles is very hard to figure out. Obviously, a veteran defensive coordinator giving you a ton of looks. And Bryce Young played his ass off. There was a great touchdown throw to Adam Thielen in the back of the end zone that was not called because they couldn't see the ball because it was against the goalpost. If you guys saw it, you guys know what I'm talking about there. And obviously, just an incredible performance by Carolina to at least get Tampa overtime. I said, listen, Dave Canales had something up his sleeve. I thought the Panthers were going to play hard. I wasn't going to take Tampa -5.5, and I was right on that. Real quick, before we get to Philly and Baltimore, I do want to say I skipped the Seahawks Jets game. As I mentioned, Seattle won that game 26-21. Jets got off to a 21-7 start. What an incredible pick six by Leonard Williams down the sideline there for 92 yards. And the Jets are the Jets. And, they got a kickoff return in that touchdown, too. There was a lot of crazy special teams plays in that game. But in the end, they got shut out in the second half. And the Jets are just a complete disaster. I was wrong on them. And for Seattle, again, with Arizona losing, that was big. Big matchup for Seattle and Arizona, who played 2 weeks ago. Now they're going to play again this week in Arizona as one of the big games of the week. Okay, so my Eagles were down 9-0 to Baltimore, and I said if we get behind early to Baltimore, that's never good. But they were able to ride the wave. Jalen Hurts gets the RPO to Dallas Goedert, followed by an incredible stop by the defense, followed by a push touchdown. And you look up, and Philadelphia leads this thing 14-12 at the half. And obviously, the two missed Justin Tucker field goals, and one with a missed extra point was huge. You put 7 points on the board there. Theoretically, Baltimore would have won the game 26-24. But this Eagles team becomes only the second team ever outside of Daniel Jones and the New York Giants 2 years ago to beat Lamar Jackson as an NFC opponent. But the story of this game was not only the fact that Jalen Carter was held 10 times and never got called. The story of the game was not Cooper DeJean pile driving Derrick Henry to the ground, but it was that this Vic Fangio Eagles defense that has mostly taken apart bad quarterbacks during this 8 game win streak, and this Eagles offense that was obviously led by Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who again did not play in this game, and the sort of new look Eagles that we've seen coming out of the bye week, led by, in my opinion, even better than Detroit, the best offensive line in football. That was a big statement win for my Philadelphia Eagles. That was a win to show that they are right there with Detroit as the class of the NFC. And for Baltimore, another huge loss combined with a Steelers win in division. And it looks like to me like Baltimore will be fighting for seeding with the Chargers and Broncos for those last two wild card spots, as I can't believe I'm saying this. But Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to win the AFC North. And I said going into the year, I did not know the impact Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry would have on their new teams. I did not think it would be this big for each of them. But I also thought in Baltimore's case, their defense would be a little bit worse with losing Mike McDonald to Seattle. I did not know how quickly Vic Fangio would get this Eagles defense. I looked at the talent: Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, obviously the two rookies in the secondary. Zach Bond has been huge, but they have gelled quicker than I thought. And as I already mentioned, Buffalo, they took it to San Francisco, who was just not prepared. Snow game, cold boys going into the cold. Josh Allen in Buffalo and James Cook running all over them, dominating San Francisco once Christian McCaffrey went out of that game. Brock Purdy had a bad fumble. Kyle Juszczyk had a bad fumble at the goal line. And with all the injuries and obviously no Nick Bosa and no Javon Hargrave, the Niners looking like a show of themselves on the defensive line. And it's just, really an injury riddled season and a Super Bowl loser hangover syndrome for San Francisco. And Buffalo keeps pace for potentially the number one seed. And then last night, I said I would take Denver. I thought the side would be 5.5. They obviously did end up covering with that pick six. That was the full Jameis Winston experience, right? 497 yards, couple of touchdown passes. Jerry Jeudy, the most yards in a game in his first game back against a former team by any receiver in NFL history, which is an insane stat to think about. And it was, like I said, the full Jameis Winston experience. Bo Nix, the incredible 93-yard bomb to Mims. Really flipped the game in my opinion, even though Judy came back and got the 1 point touchdown against Levi Wallace after that. Sort of been the story of both teams this year. Obviously the turnovers for Cleveland, who for whatever reason, offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey's sticking over play calling has basically refused to run the ball. Jameis Winston's just chucking it all over the yard. They barely decide to use Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford in the running game. This offense is completely different than the offense Kevin Stefanski ran during his first years in Cleveland and the first half of this season. Um, Jameis Winston, he's a character. We all know that. We're going to see him on Hard Knocks tonight when we take a look at the AFC North picture. But for me, Bo Nix is now ascending even past Jaden Daniels for Offensive Player of the Year. Because again, I thought Denver would win 8 games. I thought Washington would win 9-ish games. But what Denver is doing already, to me, solidifying themselves as a playoff team with that win over Cleveland. Again, barring a collapse from Houston or Denver, basically down the stretch here, I think we have our 7 playoff teams in the AFC: Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston, Baltimore, Chargers, Denver. It just depends on seeding. In the NFC, I think we have Philadelphia, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota. So that is 4 right there. I think Washington will probably again get in. I think we have 5 playoff teams right now already decided, with Atlanta, Tampa, and then obviously Arizona, Seattle, LA fighting for those 2 spots in the divisional slots. So that's my recap of week 13 of the 2024 NFL season post Thanksgiving. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. while you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brains World podcast right here on YouTube.